So it's another week, so I'm here to introduce another tabletop role-playing game in my series about just alternatives in case you want to try something other than Dungeons and Dragons. Um, so this week I'm going to talk about a series that I even after like planning the video, I'm not sure if I'm actually recommending it or not. But it is by far the most different tabletop game. Like I don't have another game to compare it to, which I think is interesting enough that it's worth at least talking about. So my group calls it Amber Diceless because that's what the game was originally called, but there is a more updated version from a few years ago called Lords of Gossamer and Shadows. And they're almost the same game. It's kind of a reprint. So I'm probably gonna call it Amber Diceless because that's what my group calls it, but they're about the same. Um, so Amber Diceless is different for a few reasons. First of all, for a little background, you are essentially playing a god. Not a god, but you pretty much are to most people. You are a character of a different reality. You are actually the most real, like from the most real reality that exists. All other realities and worlds are mere shadows of your reality. And the way like most characters come to be is people from your reality. Um, yeah, are your parents. And what's interesting is that that means that the biggest threats in the universe are going to be your parents and your cousins and your friends because if you go to another reality, they're just mere mortals to you. There's not a lot of challenge there, which gives you different ways to role play. Um, but yeah, a few other things that are different about the series, as you might have guessed from the word Amber Diceless, is that there are no dice in this system, which took me a little bit of getting used to. Instead, you pretty much just tell the DM, this is what I want to do, and your character will kind of just do it based on what the DM has planned. And there's no rolling. There is no I succeed or fail because of a die roll because for the most part, you are a god in a mortal realm. You succeed in most of the things you try to do. And it's up to the DM to come up against other like god or like chaos demon level entities that can somewhat, if at all, challenge you. And it pretty much means everybody is going around the table telling a story together. Um, and it's different to roleplay. Also, the game itself doesn't actually have a lot of like stats and attributes. There is an experience system in it with 4 attributes and then a few powers you can pick up, but it's not. That's kind of just it. Like, there's not a whole lot to it. It's actually very like simple, and it's different. But we're gonna get into that. So first of all, this is based off the Chronicles of Amber series. Now, if you've never read the Chronicles of Amber series, neither have I. I I know a little bit about it because I've been playing this game, and our game master has read the series, so we're kind of playing off of that. You don't have to know the series to play, but people that have read the series will probably enjoy it a lot more. Overall, I've also heard, like, not just from my friend, but things I've read online, that the series is actually pretty good and worth checking out. So, there it is. Um, but in the series, you are essentially a creature of the truest reality. All other realities are shadows of yours, and that kind of just means that you are a god that can mostly do what you want in these other realities because you're stronger, you're faster, you're smarter than a normal human. It's kind of like comparing a finely made steel sword versus a plastic sword. Like, you could say, like, yeah, they're both swords. Like, yeah, your character is a human. But in a fight, the steel sword is just going to win, right? That's just. And that's kind of just how it goes. Is your character is just stronger and has more abilities than other realities. But one of the interesting things you can do is that essentially all realities exist from your reality, which means you, if you have the ability, can kind of just travel anywhere. Like, you can just tell your game master, my character is going to go spend a week in this world, and you just say, okay, that world exists because you find your way there. Which allows you to do certain things like going to other realities, learning from them. You could go to a reality where time is different, which allows you like a training arc. Um, and it's very it's storytelling. That's really all it is. Um, And yeah, I keep going back to this. It's different. Um, so from Amber Diceless to Lords of Gossamer and Shadow, the Lords of Gossamer and Shadow is more modernized. There's a few new powers to it. Some of the terminology is updated, but it really is extremely similar to Amber Diceless. If you happen to have the Amber Diceless book, you could run one and you pretty much have the other. Although, just given that Amber Diceless was written in the 1980s, it's you're probably going to have a hard time finding the book. Maybe you can find a PDF of the book, but if you want a physical book, which physical books are pretty much always better, Lords and Gossamer and Shadow will work just fine. And yeah, don't worry about it. Don't think about it too much. Um, so to talk about the actual gameplay, there are 4 stats that your characters have: strength, endurance, psyche, and tactics. Now, things like strength and endurance are pretty straightforward. Psyche is your psychic, it's your magic, it's your willpower, pretty much. And then tactics is the everything else category, which I always thought felt really awkward because tactics is like your weapon skill. It's not, which is different than strength. Like, tactics is also things like your like diplomacy and your guile, like because your characters aren't just stronger than other like mortals. You're smarter, you're more witty. Like you can pretty much talk people out of anything if they're just other mortals. Which is yeah. Your characters, you can have a character like we have one person in our party that is a hero from their world. And I'll talk about some of the people in my party later, but they are a hero, so when they go to these other worlds, they still want to be a hero and they try to save and protect everyone. But your character could also just say, no, these people aren't real. We're from the real reality. We don't care about them. And you could just solve your problems with slaughter, or you can try to save them all. And that kind of conflict can be pretty interesting in a campaign. But to the stats, you have your 4 stats. The stats work on the very first session, which usually is just called like a session 0, by bidding against other players. Because the really important thing is to know who is the highest in a stat. Aside from that, you don't have your attributes publicly known, which means later on, if you want to spend your experience to increase your strength, you can do that. The only issue is that, as written, the strongest character at character creation is always the strongest. I personally do not like that system. If I were going to run the game, I'm fine with having hidden attributes, but your characters don't know who's physically strongest unless they try to actually fight each other. They don't know whose psyche is stronger until you get in a battle of magic, right? But the way the system goes is that whoever bids the most experience, because it is an auction system, is the strongest in your strength, endurance, psyche, tactics, and they always will be. And then you can spend on different, pretty much abilities or powers. So there's 2 main powers in this system. Speaking from Amber Diceless, there is Pattern, which is kind of like the forces of order, and then there's the Logariths, which are the forces of chaos. Your character probably wants to be good in one of them, but not both, because order and chaos are opposites of each other. But that doesn't mean like my character has chosen order, but there are people in my party that are chaos, and we're still on the same team. We don't fight with each other. Like they're just different ways of going about it. So, like as a member of order, if I want to go to another reality, I just walk there. I just start walking, and my character's willpower will pretty much find the path between realities to get to where I want to go. Whereas the Logris, which is your chaos magic, is gonna be more like bending your way through it. It often has like shape shifting magic. And your character actually, I think, has to have shape shifting to travel through the Logris because it bends your like mortal form in such ways that you will just die if you don't have it. Um, but similarly, there are things like magic, which you have various spell casting. If your character can do magic of the utmost reality, and you go to a world that has, like, if you go to a Dungeons and Dragons world, your character can just learn arcane, occult, divine magic, whatever, because you are a master of greater magics than that. So magic is like pretty good. One thing I've had is because my character doesn't have a lot of magical abilities, I feel like I have less options than characters who have taken magic, and I fall behind in certain ways of that. There are things you can get like words of power though, which are not like full spells, but it's just really quick. Like the absolute word of like something breaking, and you could just say this magic word, and whatever item it is breaks because you just impose your will on it. There's a list of words of power, but of course you can work with your DM to get other ones. There's another system for artifacts, which is what my character has mostly taken up. There is somebody else in our group that has taken like an artifact of like a magic armor. And because they have a magic armor, it is like indestructible material made from the realist reality. They're like you have to find a way to attack them beyond their armor because you're just yeah. My artifact, on the other hand, is a cat. I could have gone with like a sword or something, but no, I have a cat. My cat is as real as I am, so they are essentially immortal. They are also faster than cars. Their fangs are sharper than like the sharpest steel swords. Um, they have like resistances to psychic attacks. Like there's a system for making artifacts in there, and I spent most of mine on having a really cool cat. I've played this so many times that still thinking about it, I'm like, this was so dumb. But it's fun. I like it. I like my cat very much. Um, and then there's a system in Amber Diceless, it is called Trump. Now, as you're watching this, when you hear Trump, you probably think of something else because the meaning has changed over time. If you play Lords of Gossamer and Shadow, it is called Icons, which is what my group is moved towards using them. My character has also taken this, which I don't think anybody else in the party has taken this. The trumps or icons are pretty much like psychic imprints that you can put on cards or whatever else. So my character can psychically connect to other characters that I have a card of, and I am the only one that can like talk between realities with other people in the party. You could also like set traps for people if you have their psychic imprint. You can like there are options to travel to them or creating portals to places that you have a psychic imprint of. Um, I picked it because it's also something different, and I kind of like it. But yeah, the power system again, like you have to have a power to do something, but as long as you have either pattern or chaos or Lagras, sorry, you can kind of just do whatever you want because you're just bending reality to your will in different ways. Um, so if you like take order, you could just say like, "Oh, I found this thing on the ground because I can just manipulate probability to my order." Or if you take chaos, one person in our party has gone really heavy into shapeshifting to the point where they can shapeshift other people. Um, and again, they're essentially a god. Like their willpower is so much higher than people in this universe that, yeah, they just shapeshift other people to their will. And they've done some pretty cool stuff with that. The game itself does I think a pretty good job of giving you the idea that you are like if you want a power fantasy, this is the system. You're because like unless you're dealing with other like your cousins or family or like best friends or whatever, you kind of just say this is what I want and it's what happens because your willpower and strength is like so much higher. And you can create stories of like I went to this reality um like MacGuffined my way to become the king, the lord, or whatever of it. And I just sat there for like 300 years being king because I thought it was fun. And then one day I was bored, so I left the reality and haven't gone back. You could just create these stories because your character is essentially immortal, can't be challenged. And yeah, I think those sort of like side stories are really interesting to the campaigns. Um, but back to the point when I made the start of this video, would I recommend this? I don't know. It still feels very awkward to play because I'm so used to having like die rolls and attributes. And there is no math in this system, right? Because it's not like I roll a d20 and add my strength. Like no, like unless I'm challenging another person in my party to a contest of strength, in which case the DM says yeah, he has a higher strength than you, so he wins. There is no die rolling. You kind of just you're telling your own story with your friends and creating a larger story because of what you can do. Another thing you can do with this system is because your character can travel between worlds and go wherever you want. It means you can actually enter stories from or enter worlds of stories and go there. So like really early in the campaign, our group went to a Warhammer 40k world and Star Wars, and we actually just finished a short campaign in Lord of the Rings. Um, and yeah, these realities just exist because every reality is just a shadow or a fracture or whatever of your reality. Um, so yeah, you can just say like, oh, my character goes to the Lord of the Rings universe and spends 500 years there doing whatever. Or you could have an entire campaign that takes place in like Warhammer 40k. In which case, there are characters stronger than human that can challenge you, right? When you're actually making your stats, there's a few ranks of it. So human is just the lowest rank. You could be human level strength, but why would you in a game where you're gods? And then there's chaos, and then there's amber, which is where you're kind of supposed to be at, and then there's ranked amber. So you could say I'm amber +2, which means I've spent 2 extra experience into this, and I use that to try to get a little bit higher than people in my party, right? Um, but yeah, you can come from other worlds and travel to other worlds and create your own stories this way. Um, about half the people in my group that I play with weekly have played Final Fantasy 14. Um, which I'm not going to get into Final Fantasy 14 because the video is going long enough. But yeah, somebody in my party is the Warrior of Light from their Final Fantasy 14 playthrough, which means their character is canonically trained in all of the weapons and skills that the Warrior of Light from Final Fantasy 14 could do. Right. That also means they just have the crafting skills, and a lot of this you don't have to spend experience on. You just say, "Yeah, my character learned how to do this, and they can do it." Right. So like one thing on the back of my character sheet, I've written down a few things my character has very specifically studied. And these are things that I'm like my character just has knowledge of and is probably the smartest person in any reality on these subjects. So I have a superpowered cat, so I trained in like veterinary medicine, but I want my character to also be artistic. So they are trained in all forms of art because if there's an art that they don't know about, they travel to that world, spend 500 years studying it, and they've mastered it. All right. Probably the utmost example of this is somebody in our group who created a character in this world. And because you are a character that can travel to any world, um, they have self inserted into other worlds. So you could create a character in Amber Diceless or Lords of Gossamer and Shadow, and when you're playing through like a Pathfinder game, you could just say like this character is from this universe because they canonically could travel to that universe, right? Or if you're making a new character in like a Skyrim campaign, you just say like, "Oh, my parents banished me to this realm," and that is your self insert. And that's probably one of the strongest things about this system is because it canonically connects any possible reality to everything. Yeah, if you're somebody who likes having mega characters but wants a way to explain it, um, yeah, this system or these systems, whatever, is a great way to do that. Um, so yeah, I don't know again if I recommend this system, but it's different and it's really interesting. I'm sure there are others. I don't know of any other like games that do this where there's barely an attribute system. There's not a lot of dice rolling. You kind of just say, "This is what my character does," and your DM, your game master, whatever, just continues the story. Unless somebody else at the table wants to like create a conflict with you, but I don't think that's even come up in my game yet. The greatest conflict I think that's come up in my game is that we have the Warrior of Light character that wants to save everyone. And then we have some people like my character that's just like there's thousands of other similar realities. Why do I care about the people of this world? right? Because we could say like we were in a Lord of the Rings world, but it's not the only one, right? Because you could easily tell a story of Lord of the Rings where like the what are the angels? I don't remember what they're actually called. Like Gandalf doesn't exist, or what happened in a Lord of the Rings where Sauron won. And you just say, okay, this exists. Like my character adventures there or takes over the reality. You just do whatever you want, right? It's very free form. It's very freeing, actually, um, and it's different. So yeah, that's kind of the point of the entire series, I guess, is that I'm trying to introduce other different tabletops to Dungeons and Dragons. And as far as I know, this is the system that is most different from any other tabletop system I've ever played. Which is why I think it's worth reading about it, going through the wiki, um, or just, buying one of the books. Right. If you want something really different or it sounds good, I would probably recommend Lord of Gossamer and Shadow, just because it's newer and it's going to be easier to get the book than Amber Diceless, which is literally written in the 1980s. Think it was published in 1991 or something. I don't know. That's it. Um, do YouTube stuff, like the video, comment, whatever. Um, yeah, I'm going to continue this series. This might be the second to last episode of the series because I think I'm about out of tabletop games to recommend. So next week will probably be Soulbound, which is what I've been playing for a few weeks now. So yeah, follow if you want more of these, or just if you got any questions, whatever. I enjoy these videos, so write comments so I can keep doing it. That's it. Thanks.